Hey everyone, it's JG. We've got a new story event, Muhammad Abound, and that means a few new characters. Today we're going to talk about Titi, the new 6-star from the event banner. Titi is an Incantation Medic, and I have to say, that's not a great start. Incantation Medics are a weird subclass, and in my opinion, not a very good one. First off, they're not really medics. They're a lot more like a caster. They deal arts damage, but then they heal a nearby ally based on the damage dealt. If you've played with one for very long, you've seen why they're not very good medics. They can't heal anybody if there's nothing to attack. In between waves, you can't top up your team, and if you kill things too quickly, you won't get much healing from them at all. And ranged attackers can just straight up shred them. You almost always need another healer if you bring an Incantation Medic. Doing 2 jobs at once sounds good on paper. That's role compression, right? But the reality is that Incantation Medics don't heal as well as good healers, and don't deal DPS as well as good casters. The Arcanet's meta rewards operators that do one job very well, not ones who do several jobs poorly. The one place where Incantation Medics maybe work out is against tough enemies like bosses. When a big, hard-hitting enemy comes into range, you want a burst of DPS and a burst of healing at the same time. Bosses do tend to have good res, which will eat into both the damage and the healing of your Incantation Medic, but that's where they look the best. I find them pretty situational and unreliable in everyday use. So before I even look at Titi's kit, I'm not inclined to like her. She'd have to do an awful lot to overcome the weaknesses of her role. Let's take a look. First we have her talents. Her first talent lets her attack sleeping enemies, deal extra damage to sleeping or immobile enemies, and sleeping enemies anywhere on the field will take arts damage per second. This is an interesting synergy that upgrades sleep from just a stall tactic to one that can deal decent passive damage. And of course, that generates passive healing within her attack range also. The problem with this is that there aren't that many units with sleep. Most of those units aren't that good, and sometimes their sleep skills aren't even their best skills. Synergies are rarely strong enough to make a bad unit good. Unless you want to go with a max sleep strategy to stall a really tough boss, this synergy is neat, but not revolutionary. Her second talent is similar. It boosts Minoan or Sargonian operators' attack speed when their HP is high. This group doesn't have any super meta units, but Narantuya, Pepe, or Papyrus are solid ops who get a bit more solid when TT's on the field. Now let's look at her skills. S1, as with many operators, is pretty forgettable. How about S2? Let's see. Attack increases up to 180%, TT and the lowest HP operator in range fall asleep, and so do all the enemies around them. This isn't just instantaneous. Enemies that stumble into their range also fall asleep. And then her talent jumps to 3.3x effectiveness. Together with her module, that totals to 370% of her base attack per second in damage, and 220% attack per second of healing, reduced by enemy res. And both of those multiply per target, with no target maximum. For a future video, I've been researching the best healing skills in the game, so I have a big ol' spreadsheet of healer analysis. This skill is just insane. Even if you're facing A-rank res on your enemies, putting just 2 targets to sleep makes this skill S-rank for its healing. At 4 or more targets, it's the best healing skill in the game. Its range is not small, and since it's sleep-based, enemies won't move out of its range. But of course, it also deals damage. On the damage side, it's solid. She's in the same ballpark as some strong casters for DPS per target, but a little on the low side. Where she excels is in target count. She can deal that full DPS to every target in her skill range. Because this one inflicts sleep on both allies and enemies, we should really talk about how sleep works. An enemy inflicted with sleep stops moving and stops attacking. They also become untargetable by ally attacks, except for the very small number of operators who, like Titi, are able to target sleeping enemies. This is a really key point in evaluating sleep versus other crowd-controlled debuffs. It slows them down and gives you more time to heal or charge skills, but you can't capitalize on that extra time by pumping more damage into them, unlike stun, bind, slow, or push. Sleep works very similarly on your operators. They can't attack and can't block, and if they have a skill active, its timer will still tick down. However, they also can't be targeted by normal attacks. So this can be used to dodge a variety of dangerous effects, but it also makes your operators pretty useless for the duration. S2 is very much a crowd control skill. It thrives when there are lots of targets, and is a lot more mid as a boss killer. I imagine this one's seeing some play in upcoming contingency contracts, where ordinary waves of enemies are deadlier than usual. I said she'd need to be pretty impressive to make me like her. This skill it's up there. Very nice. But there's more. She also has an S3. S3 gives us this wall of text. They have not been releasing simple skills this year, have they? It attacks 2 enemies and has a weird chain reaction sleep effect, plus deals like 8,000 arts damage to them when they wake up from sleep. And then there's yet another unkillable effect. We've had a lot of these lately, that protects allies who die within range, although it doesn't protect Titi herself. This one heals so much I question if I'm using my calculator right. It can generate about 2,000 HP per second just from her direct attacks, and then another 1,800 or so from each enemy it keeps asleep. All of that gets reduced by enemy res, but it can outpace her S2, which until a few seconds ago was the best healing skill I had ever analyzed. The big burst of arts damage when an enemy wakes up can produce a heal of more than 5,000 HP, which is so much that Hoshi Alter during her S3 is about the only time an operator would have an HP bar big enough to make use of it. For damage, I count it as very competitive with Praminix Alter's S3, whether we're talking damage per target or AoE damage. The chain reaction sleep effect makes it pretty effective at keeping a lot of targets sleep locked and taking large amounts of passive damage. The unkillable effect is interesting. A wiped ally can return to the fight if you heal them back to full health. And with as much healing as this pumps out, you can potentially cycle your allies a couple of times before the skill even ends. If you use an operator with intentionally low HP, they can bounce up and down really fast, which you can use for some cheesy tactics, even against sleep-immune enemies. Okay, so where do I land on Titi? This is definitely more impressive than I expected an Incantation Medic to be. However, I think I still land at A rank here, maybe even A-. Let me explain. On paper, she's very good. Best burst healing in the game, while simultaneously dealing arts damage competitive with an S-rank caster. And with crowd control and defensive support on top of that. How could that not be S-rank? But Titi is a brilliant example of where paper analysis doesn't translate to in-game utility. I score situational units as A rank, and Titi strikes me as a lot more situational than she might initially appear. Here are 3 big weaknesses you need to be aware of. First, although her numbers are bigger, she still has all the classic weaknesses of an Incantation Medic. If you're being attacked from outside her attack range, or you kill all the units in her attack range, her healing output drops to 0. Her burst healing is insane, but burst healing isn't everything. During her skill, she provides more healing than you really need, but then drops off hard in between skills. You still need healing in between skills, and she'll still be unreliable then. Second, sleep is not a good debuff. Although she deals good damage to sleeping enemies during her skill, she is the only one dealing damage to those enemies during her skill. The other sleep units aren't that good. She doesn't stack well with the rest of your squad. She's good for single operator gimmicks, which make good YouTube videos, but isn't so useful in real life. Third, and this is most important, there are enemies who are immune to sleep. Her healing and her damage are completely contingent on being able to put targets to sleep. The one time when you most want high burst healing is when you're facing a boss, but a really large fraction of bosses are immune to sleep. Not all of them, but lots. There are just not a lot of places where you need 4,000 HP per second against enemies that aren't immune to sleep. I mentioned contingency contracts, which is a place where she could shine. But it's been, 6 months since the last run of contingency contracts? I wouldn't chase a new operator just for that. Her damage isn't high enough that you don't need another DPS. Her healing is huge, but not reliable enough that you don't need another healer. Her crowd control and defensive utility are the most interesting parts of her kit, but that niche isn't enough. Titi falls off hard against bosses, and you don't get to be S rank if you can't bring utility to boss fights. There are certainly places where Titi will be great. That's what situational means. But she doesn't break S rank for me, and I don't plan to chase her on my account. For new players, I don't think she's an operator you should prioritize to advance your account. That's all for today. Let me know in the comments if there's something you think I've missed. Please drop a like if you appreciate my perspective and subscribe for more like this.